Welcome back. That new guidance from OMB on FedRAMP is only one piece of the federal government's efforts to increase the security of the data it uses. The models agencies are using are becoming more clear as the data deluge grows. Neil Kronimus is Senior Vice President for Systems Integration at Maximus. Neil, welcome. It's great to talk to you. What's your sense of the trend that you're seeing in FedRAMP from an industry perspective?
So the things that we're seeing, the memo was very appropriate timing coming out last week and stuff, because there's a lot of companies trying to get on to FedRAMP, trying to get authorized, and there's a backlog, and finding new ways to get to FedRAMP faster so we can serve the agencies that serve the citizens. So the use of automation is a great example of that, and so we love that idea of how can we help automate, and also the services we provide. How can we go beyond just what the cloud provides, but provide wholly owned, encapsulated services, so that just helps agencies.
One of the things that Brian talked about is something that I've heard industry folks discuss pretty regularly, and that is the original intent of FedRAMP was you get an ATO and other agencies can use that ATO. A lot of folks in industry say they don't see that as much as the original intent of the program. Is that something that you see, and whatever level of that we see of people doing that now, what do you think would drive more of that so that people could reuse these authorizations on a regular basis? So
yes, I definitely agree. You get an authorization at one agency, it's harder to reuse it at another one. And so that's where I think the process can be re-examined and stuff, and collaborate with the other agencies more with FedRAMP to make it easier of a transition, because the controls are the controls. And so having to go through the process again just because it's a different agency doesn't make as much sense. So let's get the collaboration, get the communication going to make it easier so all parties agree that we can do that reuse.
I mentioned the models at the beginning of this conversation. Hybrid multi-cloud models didn't really exist when FedRAMP was stood up a number of years ago. What's the difference that has made in the way that both companies and agencies think about cloud and think about securing their cloud setups? So
the hybrid multi-cloud provides something agencies didn't have, when FedRAMP was. It was before I went to this cloud provider. Now the agency can say, I need this service from this cloud and this service from this cloud provider, but I want to keep my data on-prem. And so it gives them a more flexibility, more scalability than they had before. But it also comes with complexities as well, because now I'm dealing with more cloud service providers. I have data in more locations than before, so security becomes very important. And this is where FedRAMP really comes into play here, is because they've already done that authorization across all these cloud providers to help ease those security concerns that may come up. You wrote recently, offerings, an underlying theme with offerings as a service is the data in a time when government looks to make more data-driven decisions and both enable data sharing and keep it secure. That theme of data security, and you just talked about it a second ago, that theme of data security is another thing that didn't really exist very much, that, as I recall at least, when FedRAMP stood up. Cloud at that time was pretty much a storage capability. What's the implication that has had for the way that agencies think about their security? Well, I mean, just look at over the last few years. Data has exploded. We're gathering data from everywhere, both in the enterprise, from external and stuff, and so now we got to store it, and it's beyond storage now. How do I take that data and turn that into actionable information to help the mission? And that's where it didn't exist. So now it's like, how can solution providers come to bear with solutions to help agencies solve their mission critical problems?
You heard Brian's vision for what will happen and kind of a timeline for what they expect to do with the comments that they get on the guidance and so on. When that final guidance comes out, what will you look for? Where will you turn first in the document, and what would you expect to see there?
So the first thing I'm going to look for is I'm going to look to see what collaborative efforts with FedRAMP, with other agencies, with industry to come together. I mean, the document's great with the draft right now. Human-centered design thinking is great. But I want to see how are they going to implement that? down the road. So what kind of suggestions they get back, and how are they going to phase them in over time? Because the whole point of this is to make it easier for the agencies to serve their mission. And that's where we got to get to. And FedRAMP just is the facilitator of that around risk and security.
What are the things that they could do, do you think, to make that process easier? You referenced automation already, and that speed strikes me as very important. But what are the other elements that you think would make this process easier, both for the agencies and for vendors? Well,
one of the biggest things is continuous monitoring, because we got to monitor and see where we're at and have that feedback all the time, not just points in time here, but a continuous that. The other thing is, from an industry, we have to work with FedRAMP. We have to understand what FedRAMP's trying to do. We have to get more services in to get authorized. We also need to educate, everybody, to make sure that everybody understands this is where FedRAMP's going. Whether it's the agency, whether it's an integrator, anybody, we have to have that education.
Neil, it's great to talk to you. Thanks very much for joining me today.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate it.